Hello, everyone. It's 4 o'clock Eastern Time. It's time to start our next session. Welcome to the Professional Development and Career Panel session. My name is Shirley Lee. I am a GIS Instruction Coordinator at Purdue University Libraries and School of Information Studies. We'll have two panelists of GIS professionals sharing their geospatial career pathways and experiences involving URISA, the professional GIS organizations, and how that impact their career development. Each session will be 30 minutes, and they will have a presentation, and then there will be Q&A after each presentation. You are welcome to ask questions using the Zoom Q&A feature. You can also upvote others' questions, so the questions with the most votes will be answered if we have limited time. You're also welcome to use the chat feature if you encounter any technical problems. So I guess let's go ahead and get started. Our presenters for the first session are Sid Paddy, Kate Burke, and Wanmei Liang. They will talk about how to keep learning after graduation, professional development, and continuing education in a spatial workspace. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shirley. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our panel. As Shirley mentioned, we're going to be talking about learning after graduation. My name is Kate Berg. I am an alum from UCLA. 2015, I did my master's in my bachelor's in ecology, and I minored in geographic information systems technology. And I did my master's at University of Michigan in natural resources management. I currently am GIS lead at the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. And I am joined with two members from our URISA Vanguard Cabinet. This is a group of young geospatial professionals, and we work to support other young geospatial professionals out there. So I'll let Sid and Wanmei introduce themselves. Wanmei.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wanmei. I graduated from UCLA in 2019 with a degree in geography and GIS, and I am currently working as a GIS technician for a transportation company. Sid, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Again, my name is Sid Pandey. I did my undergrad in geography at Penn State University and my master's in GIS at the University of Maryland. And I'm currently the chair of the Vanguard Cabinet. So looking forward to talking with everyone.
All right, thank you. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to dive into a couple of different ways that you can do learning through structure and unstructured learning. We'll talk a little bit about professional networking as well as professional organizations. So we're going to start each section with a little short anecdote because I think that learning from each other's experiences, it's so important. It's helped me, and I hope it'll help you guys. So our first anecdote is, what was your first conference experience like? So for me, my first conference was in 2019. I went to the Esri conference in San Diego for the first time. And there was about 20,000 people there. And I was just blown away that there were so many other people out there just like me. I had been in my first GIS job, and I was kind of the only GIS person there. And I had felt alone. And then going to this conference and realizing there's so many other passionate mappers out there was really kind of game-changing for me. So the cool thing about our field and about technology is that it's always changing. There's always newer and cooler advancements that are being made. But the hard thing about technology is because it's always changing, right? So how do you stay on top in this industry? So I'd like you to think about what Journey said: never stop, don't stop learning. And there's two main ways that you can stay up to date in this field. So there's unstructured learning and there's structured learning. And so here are some of my favorite examples of unstructured. You could stay on top of the field through social media, through YouTube. There's a Slack community that you can join and a Discord community and chat with other professionals on these platforms and stay up to date that way. Sign up for newsletters, blogs, set up RSS feeds. That's what I have, and it really helps during my day-to-day because I have it right in my Outlook. I have a section for RSS feeds, and anytime that a new blog, maybe from Esri, is put out, I get an email and I get to see what it is. Another way is just through job postings. See what current openings are looking for in a position, and that might help you stay on track of how the technology is changing. And we're going to get into, as I said, networking and volunteering. These are two ways that you can continue learning after graduation. Now, in terms of the structured learning front, you could attend webinars, you could attend workshops, and you can attend conferences. And really altogether, these are the ideas that we grow best when we're learning from and with others. So these help you expand your knowledge. You can get insights into new technology and help level up your resume. So not just attending these things, but maybe once you get a little bit more comfortable, actually presenting at a workshop or a conference can help level up your resume as well. So there's a couple of webinar options that I want to point you to. The first is Esri MOOCs. So these are massive open online courses. These are totally free and they're a great opportunity for you to learn specifically Esri technology, and they have a bunch of different topics from cartography to spatial analyst and things like that. So I would recommend signing up for those. Those are at specific times during the year, and you do have to register for them. There's also different organizations often host webinars. So here's an example of some past webinars from URISA, which is a GIS organization. And then there's some workshop options. So this is a good option to get more detailed experience learning about a topic. First place you should check is your alma mater. Here's an example from UM. They have a great experience builder site for their GIS program, and you can check out workshops that they're offering right there on the site. And again, here's just another example of some of the workshops that URISA has offered in the past. So just to get an idea of what options are out there to keep learning. So for example, if you're interested in the GISP, there's courses on that, workshops on that, equity and social justice. There's so many different topics across the board. And lastly, we got conferences here. So I've talked about the user conference. That was my first GIS conference, but there's a lot more, including URISA's GIS Pro conference, the North American Cartographic Information Society's conference, FOSS4G, and so on and so forth. And I do want to point out local conferences. These are often cheaper and easier to get to, especially if you're a young new student and need the support for that. So check out what's available locally for you. So for example, at the state or regional level in Michigan, we have 2 local GIS conferences from Imagine and MyCamp. So just be sure to check what's available, and that could be as simple as Googling GIS conferences in your state. So these are some options for you to do some learning, but when do you actually accomplish this learning if you're working full time? The first thing that you should do is don't be afraid to ask your supervisor. A lot of managers will support your learning as part of your professional development, including attending conferences and things like that. So hopefully most of the time your employer will be supportive of it. If not, we really do encourage you to try and find the time to stay on top of the field, including during your free time, your lunchtime. Or my favorite is during mindless data entry, because God knows there's a lot of that. So put on a podcast or a training video and put that on a second monitor while you're inputting data. That's another option. All right, and I'm going to pass it over to Juan May to talk a little bit about professional networking.
Hi everyone, my name is Juan May, and let's talk a little about professional networking today. So what is it? Why is it important? Tips, tricks, and free networking opportunities. I want to start off by sharing a story. So 3 years ago to this day, I was at my first virtual GIS conference, much like this conference today. I was 6 months past graduation, unemployed, with no internships or any GIS experience under my belt. I remember being so nervous to interact with others. I just wanted to sit in a corner and not exist. Like many young graduates, I had imposter syndrome. I was afraid to network, talking to people was scary, but as time progressed, I joined GIS groups, increased my network, and here I am today presenting for the first time at a GIS conference. And Kate, every time I sip my water is a next slide. All right, next slide. Why is networking so important? There's 3 reasons. The first reason is networking builds your reputation. It helps establish yourself as a reliable, supportive, considerate, and knowledgeable professional. Number 2, networking strengthens your support network. If you are looking for a job, your network connections can connect you with companies that are hiring. If you are at a good job and looking for a next opportunity, your connection can help you out as well. If you are stuck on a GIS task, someone in your network will probably know exactly how to help you. And number 3 is networks introduces you to industry rock stars. Industry rock stars are important people, and important people have power. So it's beneficial to be connected with them, who can also introduce you to other people in your industry. By now, you should be thinking, okay, I understand why networking is important, but how do I actually network? Here are 4 tips on how to be successful in networking. The first is to be curious about the other person. Ask questions such as, what's the best part of your job? What has your journey been like since graduation? The second is to talk about yourself. It's the best way to put yourself out there. Tell people about your motivations, your passions, what you want to do, etc. Number 3 is showcase soft skills. Your adaptability, creativity, and emotional intelligence are all things that future employers look for. And the 4th one is to actively listen. People like you more when you listen. You learn a lot of information, and if you listen, you will know your next question. Next, I will highlight 3 free ways to network. The first one is through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great way to connect with other GIS professionals. However, it is really important to recognize the difference between connect and follow buttons. A good rule of thumb is, if you like somebody's posts and content and just want to follow their career, you should follow them. If you want a professional relationship with someone, you should connect with them. And when you do connect with people, you should always leave a customized short message on why you want to connect. So for example, if someone's presentation today resonated with you and you want to connect with them, you leave a message like, "Hi, I attended your presentation on climate change today and found it fascinating. Would love to connect with you." And the reason I'm saying this is because many LinkedIn users do not connect with people they don't know. A second way to network is through GIS chat on Twitter. GIS chat is a huge GIS community on Twitter for anyone to share career advice, ask technical questions, and make connections with other GIS professionals. Every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, Kate starts a GIS conversation, ranging from describe your day in a GIF to what's your GIS pet peeve. Kate is also the meme queen in the GIS world, so make sure to check out her memes. Another free way to network is through local and virtual meetups. These are casual conversations in relaxed settings, usually in bars or restaurants, and it's a great way to get to know other professionals. Now I will hand it over to Sid to talk about professional organizations.
All right, thanks, Juan May. So I know we're getting a little low on time, so I'll move a little bit quickly. Feel free to ask any questions you have. But when we were thinking about talking about professional organizations, the question came up, why would you want to join, or what made you want to join the organizations you are a member of? So for me, similar to Juan May, I remember attending an event when I first got into the industry, feeling completely overwhelmed, didn't really know anyone. And I kind of felt myself retreating almost, but then realized like there's a lot of really awesome people in this industry doing great work. I need to start to get to know them because it's going to be beneficial in the long run. And so hopefully some of the things we'll talk about here will help you in situations where you're trying to decide what organizations to be a member of. So what are professional organizations? It's essentially a group of professionals doing similar work, trying to advance their profession, develop connections with people, and then also to market themselves, whether it's for a job or you're trying to sell a service, or what your company does, or a variety of other things. Benefits of an organization. So kind of similar to what you've already heard, it's a great way to increase your visibility. So you can give presentations, you can get involved in the different activities that organization does. It's a great way to develop your leadership or technical skills, either through training or volunteering, or other activities. The obvious, developing your network and your connections, just through the circle of people that you're working with. You're going to meet a lot of folks, and a lot of them are going to be with you throughout your career. So it's a great way to build long-term friendships and connections. URISA and many other organizations have a lot of opportunities to volunteer as well. So if you're job searching, looking for an internship, or you just want to give a little back to the industry or to your community, there's a lot of ways in which you can volunteer your technical skills through organizations like URISA and others. A lot of these groups also have job and internship opportunities that are available to folks, and sometimes they're the first place those jobs go to. So it's a great way to keep an eye out for those things. And then, of course, continuing education and mentoring. So how do you get involved? Again, similar to what you've heard before, but talk to your boss, your company, your university, professors that you work with, and see if they have organizations that they would recommend you be a member of. I am a member of URISA and highly recommend to anyone I talk to join. And I'm sure other organizations that your friends and colleagues are members of would say the same about theirs. So it's always good to check with them. Sometimes companies also are more heavily involved in certain organizations as well. So they would encourage you being involved. There are also student and young professional rates. So if you're just starting out and you don't have the money to pay the big entry fee to be a member, sometimes many organizations are able to offer some assistance there. And also organizations like, for example, my company would also help offset some of those costs as well. It's also a great, another great opportunity is for you to connect with people that are already in the organization. So if you want to learn a little bit more about it, how you can get involved, what does this organization do, you can reach out to people through LinkedIn or other avenues to learn more about it before you actually join. And then similarly, you can research committees and working groups. So if you have a particular passion or interest for how you want to apply GIS or remote sensing or something else, a lot of organizations like URISA will offer you those opportunities to be in committees and working groups and really flex that skill of yours or those that interest. And then volunteering, lots of opportunities to give back. So in terms of learning in a professional organization, I personally feel like the inspiration you get from just hearing what other people are doing, just very much like what we've all been doing today, hearing about all the cool work that everyone does, how you can apply some of those techniques or technologies in your own work is really beneficial. And it also allows you to help inspire others as well with the work that you do. Important updates to technology, industry, and policy. So as Kate mentioned earlier, so much in our industry is changing. There's all kinds of new technology that comes in, and even policy can change as well, which could drastically change the way we do our work. And organizations like this help share that information out with the masses. So it's a great way to stay informed. You're also going to learn a lot of tips and tricks, and you're going to have people that you can reach out to for advice when you need it, especially if you're in the one person or small team, GIS team. Whenever you kind of join the workforce, it can help to have other people in different organizations that you can reach out to for advice when you need it. And then it's a great way to practice your communication, your leadership, your networking, and your mentoring skills, because there's so many ways to get involved. Tons of organizations to be involved in. URISA is the association for GIS professionals, but there are a bunch of other ones, ASPRS, USGIF, AAG, and then there's a lot of local GIS organizations as well, which I highly recommend getting involved in. One, because you're going to learn about the local geospatial things that are going on, but also you're going to build your network in the area that you're working. So it's extremely beneficial to check out some of those more local and sometimes smaller organizations, in addition to some of the big ones that are on the slide here. And then I think this is my last slide. One other way that you can get involved, as Kate mentioned earlier, Juan May, Kate, and I are all members of URISA's Vanguard Cabinet. We're a group of young professionals that's focused on helping other young geospatial professionals either get their start in the industry or learn and grow and develop. And we do that in a variety of ways. So we run a mentoring program, which hopefully you've all heard about. If not, I highly recommend checking out URISA's mentoring network. We have an outreach team that is constantly putting out news and updates and events and other activities that you can get involved in. Like this week, we have a GIS Day bingo card, which hopefully you can take part in. But we also like to shed light on young professionals in the industry that are doing cool work. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you see we try to spotlight people as well. At the GIS Pro Conference every year, we run a student competition where you can showcase projects that you've been working on in class, and as well as opportunities to present and volunteer at the conference every year. And then we also have a coalition for young professionals, so it's just another way to get involved. So I think I'll pass it back to Kate now.
Thank you, Sid. All right, I hope you all learned a little bit about how to keep learning after graduation. I have our contact information on the slide here. Take a screenshot of it. Have your first action be to connect with us on LinkedIn and practice that professional networking that we talked about. And again, we can encourage you to send a note so we can know a little bit more about you. So hope you all have a great rest of your day, a rest of the GIS Day conference, and I'll pass it to the next panel section.
Thank you, Kate, Sid, and Wan Mei. That is a great presentation with a lot of information, a lot of useful tips. I would like to ask the audience if there's any questions, please type into the Q&A in the Zoom so our panelists can answer those. You can also use the chat. That we encourage to use the Q&A to type in your questions. Okay. I don't see any questions at this time. Oh, wait, we got one question. Okay, there's one question on, do you have a suggestion for keeping track of what sorts of learning activities you've done?
Sure, I can take that, or at least I can start. I've used my LinkedIn to kind of catalog different things that different events that I've attended. Even in my email, sometimes I'll like have a folder of different conferences or presentations that I've attended or given, just so I have a log of what I've been doing and how I've been contributing. So I think everyone has different ways of capturing that stuff, but those are how I do it.
I would give a shout out to creating a portfolio, a GIS portfolio. I have another presentation on this that you can check out, Cape Bird GIS portfolio, but that's a great way to catalog everything that you've worked on, not just for yourself, but to potential employers in your network. And this could be like a website, a story map, anything.
Thank you. We got another question in the Q&A. How much time would you say you contribute to professional organizations? Is this in addition to your job, or do you get time to do organizational work on the clock?
I don't get time on the clock, but I'm very fortunate to have flexibility in my schedule to take meetings in the middle of the day. I'd say it, for me at least, 10 hours a week between different things that I'm working on.
Specifically to the URISA Vanguard Cabinet, there's an expectation of amount of time that you're supposed to volunteer. I think it was something like 7 hours a month. So Sid is going above and beyond.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't see any questions in the Q&A or the chat. I think we can move on to our next session. And then, if you have more questions, we can have them answered after this presentation. Okay. The presenters for our next session are Dr. Steve Steinberg, Dr. Sheila Steinberg, Judy Kobe-George, and Alan Eba. They're all members of URISA, and also they are all Big Ten alumni. So share their geospatial career pathways, and I will share my screen. Just give me a minute. Oh. Can you all see my screen? Yes. Yeah. Please go ahead.
I think I am first up. So if you go to the next slide, and I think we just have a slide per person, kind of introduce ourselves. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alan Eyeball. You can see by the degree dates over here, I went to Indiana University and University of Iowa. The thing I found, I'm on here like this, how do you do this? Are we the dinosaurs of GIS, or are we the old guard? What do you want to call us? But you probably weren't born when we're getting our degrees, sort of thing. But I'll go over a little bit about my background. Started at Indiana University, actually thought I was going to be a psychiatrist, and that didn't play out the way I wanted it to from the medical school perspective. But I always loved geography. So I minored in geography, and what I ended up doing is staying an extra year and got a degree in geography. That took me into some internships, which I highly recommend after my bachelor's degrees there. And that led me to a scholarship that I got to the University of Iowa, where I did my master's in urban planning and geography there, and got some really good hands-on. And this is really sort of the start of GIS to some extent. So you'll hear things like ArcInfo, Workstation, and things like this that you probably don't want to know about because the technology has come so far since then, but we sort of the, pioneers of GIS back when it was just up and coming, really started in this time period with the beginning of the early 90s and late 80s, early 90s, I'd say. Anyway, hands-on experience with GIS, which led me into the first job of my career with space imaging. Actually had a couple engineering projects before that I worked on, but then I went where I was a manager level person is at Space Imaging in 1999. And that was the first, it's a joint venture between Lockheed Martin and Raytheon, which put up the first commercial use satellite for taking pictures of the Earth and doing remote sensing and looking at things like health of crops, pervious and impervious surfaces, that sort of thing. And I would say that what led me down this path and what got me into space imaging was contacts that I made with the professors that I had at the University of Iowa that knew folks at space imaging, and again, just a career center type of things, and your professors keeping in touch and helping getting recommendations to potential employment opportunities. So anyway, that's what got me to space imaging. They didn't win what's called the next generation satellite, so they were going out of business. And at that point, I started a company called Data Transfer Solutions, focused GIS-wise on infrastructure mapping. So think about Ghostbusters vans driving down the road and picking up anything you can see in the right-of-way in terms of signs, signals, pavements, and then doing condition analysis. So we're putting all this into a GIS, how well your pavement's performing, how well your infrastructure is performing. Did that for quite some time. So I've moved from satellites to sensors on vans. And today I am the president of a company called iLock, which is actually a security company for using your iris to scan and give you access to buildings and all this sort of thing. Similar stuff, still sensor technology, but taking things from what you had at a outer space level. And now we're down to drones and I would call it security systems that are using similar technology to get you access to things, but it's all now shrunk and miniaturized well beyond what it ever was, 30 years ago. And I would say what really got me going on this journey was my student membership with URISA that I did right at the end of my my time at the University of Iowa. I took a student membership at URISA and helped volunteer at some conferences. And what I really wanted to learn was, when I was in college, a lot of the geography was theoretical. So you're looking at location, place theory and things like this. But I was wanting to see, how did they put that in practice in real life? So I got some of that from the urban planning side, but URISA had the cities, the counties, the utilities, the people that use GIS and use geography for real on a daily basis. And I learned a ton from the organizations that were involved and the people that were involved with URISA who are putting geography to practice. And I've been a member ever since. I think I've been on a lot of the committees. I would say all of them, but a bunch of the committees of URISA, and am a past president from 2015. But it started from the very beginning and then learning that way. And so for me, I think that it's getting involved. I think you heard that in the last session is important, and taking it upon yourself to get into internships and trying to put the technology to use has been beneficial throughout my career, and the networking and relationships with the folks that you're going to hear from after me, as well as others through URISA, have been invaluable throughout the career. So that's sort of my journey. I'll give it to who's next.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great.
Sound good.
Great, thank you. So, hi, I'm Sheila Steinberg, and I did go to one of the Big Ten schools. I have the logo behind me and it's here on the screen, Penn State, go Nittany Lions. I was there a long time ago. I was there in the 90s. And I think the best thing for me, I come at things really differently probably than a lot of people on this call, because I come out of the social sciences, but also the environmental sciences. I came from the forestry program at UC Berkeley. I'm ex-Peace Corps. I spent almost 3 years overseas in Guatemala doing forestry after I got my master's from Berkeley. And then I went into something called rural sociology, which is hard to say, but if you're from a Big Ten school, you may have heard of it. It's really the sociology of people who live out in the countryside in the rural areas. So you might think, what is that? How does that tie in with GIS? So when I was at Penn State in the early 90s, my professor said, I have a grant, a USDA grant to do a restudy on the Amish that haven't been studied in about 50 years. Do you want to work on that project? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. So I got a lot of hands-on multiple methods research experience, but I had to learn GIS on my own. So I wasn't taking classes. I did get access to, Penn State had a lot of labs that had GIS. Remember, this is mid 90s. So I was there 93 to 96. So I made a lot of friends in the labs and I worked nights to learn GIS and really only got by with a little help from my friends. And since that time, fast forward, I become a professor and I've worked in that intersection of people and environment. I'm really passionate about using geographic information systems as a methodology, as a tool to empower communities. So one of the great things I learned at Penn State was this focus on community and the power of community. And I got really into the theory of that. Carry that with me throughout my career, predominantly taught in social science programs since that time. And now I'm a professor of GIS, social and environmental sciences at University of Massachusetts Global. So I think the best thing that I can share about my journey is things don't always go how you plan, and taking the most advantage of the opportunities that come your way is good. So just say yes, even if you're kind of scared to say, oh, I don't know how this experience is going to be. Like I felt like that a little bit about Peace Corps. I don't know where I'm going to end up, because when you apply to Peace Corps, you don't know. You speak Spanish, you'll probably go to a Spanish speaking country. So I think that, and also another thing I've learned throughout my career is just rely on your friends. And a lot of times you'll make good friends when you don't know something, because they'll help you out, you'll help them out. So the things that I've always been weakest in are the things where I've made my best social relationships, because maybe I'm good at something else and I can help a very technical person with something social, and they can help me with something very technical. So recently just had the occasion to visit Penn State and go back and visit the guy and his family who helped me learn GIS. So it was only because he wanted to be nice that he taught me and other research assistants how to learn to do it. But we've stayed friends for 30 something years. So I would just encourage you, you never know where the pathways that you are involved with will take you. And all of the speakers thus far have been talking about taking advantage of networks, getting after experiences. And the other thing I would say is everything that you do doesn't have to add up nicely. Like my career path has gone like this, and like this. People go, well, what is wrong with you? Because you did like forestry at Berkeley. Undergrad, you did communication studies and environmental studies. Grad school, you did rural sociology. So what are you? Are you a social scientist or an environmental? My answer would be I'm both. So I don't think you need to let people define who you are. If there's tools you want to learn them. If there's different approaches you want to try that aren't the norm in your discipline, go after them. And try to work with people who are different from you, because if we all just stick together with people who are like us, it's very boring. And so that's what I would say. And you might get a boyfriend or girlfriend or meet your husband or wife or partner through GIS. I met Steve through it. When I got to Humboldt State, my second teaching job, my main advisor said, I need you to go find out the guy who's in charge of GIS here at Humboldt. And I'm like, what? I just got here. I don't want to go find someone. And I did. And I found Steve. And so we started out as friends, writing about, and then collaborating, and then ultimately got married and have written books and have had a kid and written a few other books. So you never know where your path could take you. And I just would say that you guys are all doing the right thing, and so happy to be part of this session and look forward to the Q&A that we'll have in a little bit following the other two speakers. So I'll turn it over to the next speaker.
All right, well, I guess that's me, the guy you had to come find at Humboldt. Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Steinberg. I also attended a couple of Big Ten schools, and Kate went to the right one from the Vanguard Cabinet earlier, so go blue. Sorry, Illinois, we're gonna have to take care of you this weekend. But I want to echo some things Alan and Sheila both said, which is you don't know where your path's going to lead. I came into this field probably like many of you because I was interested in something else and discovered geospatial stuff along the way. I first encountered aerial imagery as an undergraduate in a wildlife biology class where we were using old era photos to look at habitats. And that's really what led me to go to Michigan to get into, at the time it was called SNRE, School of Natural Resources and Environment, now SEAS, which is what Kate called it. And my experience there was really more about the natural resource stuff. That's what I was into. But as I know many of you know, many of your talks this morning, we're looking at trees and other environmental conditions and land cover. I found that imagery and GIS were important tools to understanding those environmental contexts, environmental change, and so on. And that's really where I fell into this field, not unlike what Sheila just talked about or Alan just talked about. Came into this not knowing this was a field. And while a lot of you may now be studying geospatial technologies as a discipline, it's actually more common that it's tied to some other disciplines. So I don't think that's really changed in all these years. Following that experience at Michigan, I would say one of the things Alan alluded to as well, my advisor at the time was very adamant that all of his grad students joined a professional association. In our case, it was ASPRS that Sid referred to earlier, the Remote Sensing Society, because we were primarily focused on the remote sensing side of the house. So I got involved in that professional association and began to network, attend regional conferences, as Kate alluded to as well, in Michigan, and got to know people. And what that led to was the opportunity then to continue a PhD at Minnesota. And again, I would say 100% it was the networks that mattered. My advisor at Michigan was highly respected in the field at the time. When I applied to PhD programs, not just at Minnesota, but actually a couple other Big Ten schools as well. I'm oversimplifying to say it, but they basically said, oh, you worked with Chuck at Michigan. You're obviously somebody we should look at taking on as a PhD student. It was a definite networking foot in the door. Don't discount the people you're working with, your faculty, your fellow students that you're going to be going through your career with. Went to Minnesota and did my PhD there. And like Sheila, I was very interested in staying in academia, or at least so I thought at the time, and went on to become a professor of environmental and natural resource sciences at Humboldt for many years, leading our geospatial programs there. But one of the interesting things, again, the networking that I want to touch on, because I was involved in a lot of networks while I was on faculty at Humboldt, and in particular one that was a watershed institute doing water work in Northern California, I got appointed to a state board on water quality. And through that state board, I met another Michigan alumni who was on that board, who worked for the next thing on my list, the Southern California Coastal Water Research Project. And he literally, after our third quarterly meeting, walked up to me on break and said, hey, do you want to come work for me? And I said, why would I do that? I'm a tenured professor at a university. It's a lifetime job. And he said, because I think you'd be really good for a position I have open. Long story short, I ended up accepting that, and we moved to Southern California, where I led that department for a number of years. The networks mattered. Had I not been meeting people and talking to people and demonstrating my interest in these topics, that opportunity wouldn't have come to pass. And most recently, my current job, I'm the Geographic Information Officer for the County of Los Angeles, California. Again, it was networks. It was through many of my colleagues in California, professional GIS community, through our California chapter of URISA, started telling me, hey, there's an opening for a new GIO in the county. We think it'd be really great opportunity for you and you'd be a good person in that role. They pestered me quite a bit at the ESRI conference and encouraged me over some beverages at the after session get-togethers at some of the local watering holes. And that's sort of what led me to my current job, working at LA County, which is actually, again, a very different than I would have said when I was leaving my PhD. I would have never said I would go into government or these non-academic positions that I did. I let the path, the networks, and the opportunities sort of guide me, and at every step had a lot of opportunities to learn and grow and leverage these skills that you start with in grad school and you don't know where you're going to go or as an undergrad. So I would just echo again, get involved, get networked. The Vanguard Cabinet members earlier talked about this too. Show up at conferences and talk to people, show an interest. The people now that I have the opportunity to hire, very often the way we know them is because they show up at a state conference or a national conference, and we get to know them through URISA and professional networks and mentoring programs. I certainly say it helped me get where I am. Certainly, the connections and the academics in the Big Ten programs are phenomenal, and they're some of the oldest in the nation in these fields. But it's also, you have to put yourself out there and not be shy, and interact with folks. So with that, I know we want to leave some time for questions, so I will pass off to Judy for her story, and then we'll go from there.
Great, thanks, Steve. So my name is Judy Colby George. I went to University of Wisconsin. I, like everyone else, started out in another field altogether. I started in astrophysics and loved it. Didn't ever think I would quit it. And then realized that I really liked problem solving, and geography was a great way to continue doing problem solving with people involved, which is much harder than physics, actually. People make it so much more complicated. And so I found out that I love geography and I love thinking about how you do planning. And then also I was on the fencing team when I was at Wisconsin, and because it's a Division I school, obviously, you had to have a declared major. So I had to keep running around trying to find declared majors until I figured out what I wanted to do. So I had to declare majors all the time. But I had a great experience in the geography department. And then I was also in the environmental studies. I got a certificate. They did not have an undergraduate degree at the time I was there in environmental studies. But that certificate really opened me up to interdisciplinary study and, geography as well. And one of the greatest things I found about going to a large school like Wisconsin was I could take classes in so many different things and think about how they work together and how you could apply different disciplines together. And then when I applied to stay for my master's, I remember that the essay that I had to write was, why didn't I fit in any department? You had to prove that you were interdisciplinary. That was the essay that I had to write to get into the land resources management program. And that was great. I really enjoyed my time at Wisconsin. And then when I finished, my master's was on developing a marine GIS for the state of Maine, because I knew I wanted to move to Maine. That was always my goal. And so I left Wisconsin, which I loved. If it had an ocean, I probably would have stayed, but I wanted to go back to the ocean. And so I came back to Maine and finished up writing my master's. And at the time I was at Wisconsin, same as everybody else, my advisor, Steve Ventura, was my advisor, and he was involved in URISA. And so he said, you have to go to this URISA meeting. And I did. So I don't think I joined right away. And then when I got out to Maine, all the meetings seemed so far away from us that it took me a little while to get back involved. But I've always been involved in local GIS users groups as long as I've been here. So I worked for a small little GIS consulting company. It was actually a guy who was a surveyor and decided he was interested in GIS. And so he hired me to help him do GIS work. And I did that for 10 years. And then he decided to go back to the woods and literally moved into a shed in the woods. And I decided I wasn't really done with that yet. So I started my own company in 2001 that I have continued to run, but it's mostly been small. It's been me and one or two other people. And so having the collaboration ability of being part of other groups has been great, because otherwise I would just be thinking in my own head, what should I do for this? But having a great network has made all the difference in being able to figure things out. And on every side of it, like, how do you own a business? And how do you do this project? And there have been people I could ask all along the road. And then I went back to school again and got a second master's at University of Maine, just because I'm crazy, but I also was really interested. You know, it'd been a long time since I'd been in school, and I just wanted to see. I do a lot of work in public participation GIS, and so I really wanted to focus on that aspect of, you know, how do you really engage people, and what are the ways in which geospatial tools are best used to engage people. And so I did that. And then a couple of years ago, I purchased a landscape architecture firm to add to the GIS. And so now we've been working on collaborating about visualizations and things like that, and really enjoying my time. Really, I love working with the communities. I mostly work with small towns. So Maine's a very rural state, and I spend most of my time working with small towns, and really, really enjoy that work. And then I get to work with other people outside of the state of Maine through URISA. So I do a public participation GIS workshop, and all the work that I get to do helping people is as a mentor, and in other ways really enriches my career and my time. So that's sort of my spiel about, but how starting out at a Big Ten school and making my strange path through it got me to where I am today.
Very cool. So I guess we open it up for questions here.
Well, and there was one in the chat or in the Q&A. It got Sid answered it, and then it went to the answered section. But I think I'd like to answer that one too. The question was where you know, all of us have worked in different fields: academia, local government, private sector. What do we think the next hot area for GIS is? And I'll give probably a non-answer answer. I think it's whatever you're working on. And the reason I say that is, for the entirety of my career, both teaching and in the public sector, I think everything we've done in GIS and remote sensing for the last 50 years that this has been an industry, and certainly the last 30 that have been common and popular, we haven't solved all the problems, because we have higher resolution data, we have more information, we have better abilities to locate things in the environment, and we have new questions. So yes, it was all natural resources and planning, and where a lot of us came from in the early days, but now we're dealing with social issues, community equity, public health, and so on. I think whatever your passion is, there's a niche to get into for at least starting your career out of school, and then follow it where it goes. You know, I started in natural resources. I ended up in government, where I work on health and social equity and other issues. I didn't study that explicitly, but this can take you anywhere, and you can follow your passion, would be my answer.
And this is Sheila. I would say, I think that where it's headed is more integration at the intersections between different fields. Whereas in the past, there's been traditional arenas of GIS. I feel like now more as we study voting, as we look at equity, inequity, all of that, I believe that it's coming more into the mainstream. So I'd say, even if you're not an expert, but you're just kind of interested in it, explore that, because it's definitely branching out into all kinds of areas, that even the not technical areas, but areas that people care about. And when people care about it and there are problems to be solved, like Judy was saying, GIS is a great tool to help solve those problems through engagement with people and places. Sorry, Alan, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so I've got a few, but I mean, to me, what's happening with climate change is definitely geography. What's happening with carbon, the carbon footprint and all that kind of thing. I think it's all important, and geography plays a role in GIS and how we track what's happening and hopefully making some changes that help us with our climate battle. I also think that our infrastructure is aging, and GIS to support infrastructure management, whether it be water or transportation or you name it, those things are all aged at this point. And some of the stuff's over 100 years old that's still in the ground that we're using. So those are issues that I think GIS plays a role in. And I think leveraging the technology that's existing today that we didn't have when we first came into this, like artificial intelligence to look and train data so that you can see patterns in what's happening is a big area that I think we can leverage what computers give us, right? And what those things that are out there, what we have in terms of our mobile platform. And look, I've seen some things when what's called augmented reality, where we're looking at our underground infrastructure on a phone, which, you know, just for where where it's at and what's happening. Anyway, I think there's all kinds of really cool tools. Drones brought the satellites down to now to 1-inch pixels that we can get information from. It just, to me, all of that is great things to get involved with and leverage to help us battle the issues that we have today. As I mentioned, like you said, the social equity issues, climate change issues, infrastructure, all that stuff's not going away. And geography plays a role in trying to answer those questions and support. I know I said I needed 3.5 hours to answer questions, so I'll try to keep it short.
The only thing I would add, I agree with what everybody said, is that I think one of the ways that geospatial tools really helps is that, so it helps in the data side of things, but in telling the story, right? Having a whole bunch of data doesn't really help us until we can tell the story of that data and help people understand what the data is telling us. And I think the geospatial tools are really superb for helping to tell the story.
Thank you. And Kate, Sid, and Wene, if you want to answer questions, feel free to do so. And
I think I already typed my answer in the chat, so I'll leave the time for others to respond.
Yeah, and my thought has already been said. GIS is a tool that you can apply to a lot of different fields. So it's whatever is interesting to you is how you should apply it.
So I see a question in the chat. Thanks everybody so far for your comments and questions. Great comments. For the Steinbergs or others, how do you get into writing books? Was it something you wanted to do, or did that kind of fall into your lap? Steve, do you want to talk about that?
Okay, I think it's a little bit of both. When Sheila and I met, we were really interested in getting social science students at the university into using these technologies. So we had this idea that all the GIS books and materials tended to be more natural resource focused as a general rule, not exclusively, but there wasn't really an access point for social sciences. So we thought, gee, somebody should teach a class. And then we started looking at teaching a class on that and realized there's no book. So then we thought we should write a book. And literally it was that, I mean, it was that unplanned or that planned. We put together a proposal. We shopped it around to publishers at the sociology conference in Chicago, back in 2003 probably, or something like that. And we found an editor who thought it was a good idea, and that became our first book, GIS for the Social Sciences. And we built coursework around it. We did a lot of research work around it, participatory GIS and so on. And once we got that book out, I think it kind of gave us the book bug a little bit. And then we followed on in subsequent years doing some other stuff. So I think you know, we saw a need that needed to be filled in part, and then we found an editor and a publisher that was willing to take, at that time, what was a big risk on, is there even a market for something like this? And I'd say, you know, 20 years on almost since we published that book, we've seen a lot of growth of GIS in these sort of social contexts that earlier was not as common as it is today.
Well, and I think rolling it back even further, before we wrote the book proposal and went to that fancier sociology conference, we were at kind of a nondescript conference in Las Vegas that was interdisciplinary. And we're like, what are we going to talk about at this conference? Oh, let's talk about some cool interdisciplinary mixture between what you do, Steve, and what I do. And that smaller conference venue that gave us freedom to talk about interdisciplinary. And this was back in the day, you're talking 25 years ago, where, or at least 20 years ago, where people weren't really that cool with interdisciplinary, like your sociology, your environmental science, but the two don't mix, like, you know, chocolate and peanut butter. Oh, but when chocolate mixes with peanut butter, you get Reese's peanut butter cup. So, you know, that's good. But we had to kind of get into one of those like funky conference venues to explore it. And then we took it more mainstream. Luckily, we found Steve says my voice cuts through walls. Okay, that's a nice compliment. So we're in this conference and I'm like, we have this proposal on GIS. And it was like cutting through the din of the walls of sound. And they heard it. And this lady's friend heard it, the editor's friend, and he comes over and he goes, hey, if these people can write it all, sign them up. But, you know, I think it's because my voice cuts through walls. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. There's a question for Alan. Does your master's in urban planning heavily focus on GIS? I'm interested in both GIS and urban planning, so I'm curious about the overlap in MURP program.
Yeah, I would say that at the time, GIS was pretty much in its infancy. So the geography side of the house focused quite a bit on theory of spatial location theory and just more theoretical approach, where the urban planning folks were getting into the beginnings of GIS and how it could be applied in a planning framework for cities and counties like parks and recreation and water and sewer and that sort of thing. So for me at the time, it was really URISA and the urban planning group that brought it into GIS in practice. Now today, I think that a lot of the different organizations and universities are actually have degrees in GIS itself. So it's become a common practice more so now that I think you could go into planning and get some GIS discipline there, but also in the geography itself. In those different programs, you can get GIS there too. So it's broader, I would say, from a GIS perspective than it was back in our time.
Thank you.
Yep.
I actually have one question. So I see some of you are certified as GIS professionals. So would you recommend that certification to like our students or the young professionals?
Yeah, I'm on the board for GISCI, and obviously I back it. I would say that it is a good thing. It is growing in the profession, and a lot of folks it's getting towards where certain projects and jobs it's a requirement for you to go even to respond to certain project proposals and that sort of thing. Well, I've seen some of the governmental agencies and folks that actually will give some sort of, I would say, additional compensation with GISP. Not all do that, but some have gone along those lines as well. And I think in general, it's an organization, I wouldn't say similar to URISA, it doesn't have all those programs, but it has a network of folks that you can talk to about issues that come up and in the profession and network with and learn from. So I think it adds that as well. So I would say yes to GISP. I think it's still in its infancy in terms of how deep it goes across the geospatial different disciplines about its importance, but I think that importance is growing.
And I'll add in just from the side of somebody who is a large employer of GIS professionals at LA County. We have about 155 GIS staff. We are the biggest county in the country, so that kind of makes sense. When we're looking at candidates for jobs, that's a huge attractant for me, is to see that somebody has that certification, not because of what the certification is on its own, but because coupled with other experience and education and everything else, that tells me that candidate has taken the extra effort to commit themselves to continuing education, because to remain certified means you have to do continuing education through your career to recertify every 3 years, and that they meet some at least minimum set of threshold knowledge, because, you know, it's not any of the Big Ten schools, of course, but there are universities out there that'll give people a piece of paper that says they know something about GIS or remote sensing, and then you interview them and realize they know very little except how to spell GIS. There are other schools that teach you very well and you're very capable, but that gives us some floor or baseline to say, okay, this person has met some basic criteria to get their certification and they're committed to continuing to learn. So I think it's great in both hiring and evaluating candidates for jobs.
I'll give a perspective as someone who doesn't have a GISP. I just took the practice test. So the GISP, it has two components to it. It has kind of a portfolio part of it where you show that you've done GIS stuff. And then there's the test that you have to take. And I think that the portfolio part, you have to have at least 4 years of professional experience to get it. And so I just took the test. I barely passed the practice test. I have 5 years experience in the real world. I took my first class 10 years ago. So just to give you an idea of like, maybe if you've just graduated, it might not be for you, but it's something to start thinking about and start, planning like, okay, I have to show that I'm in the GIS community. How do I do that? Maybe I'll give a presentation. So just things to start thinking about if you're a new person, but don't feel like you have to go out and get it immediately because it can be a little tough test. Like I said, I barely passed the practice, and I'm going to be doing a little bit more studying before I take the actual one.
And make sure you keep track of all those things that you do, so that when you do want to apply, you have your little folder, or you keep it in LinkedIn or wherever you're going to store it, that you keep track of that stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. I should write down today's presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for the input from different perspectives. I don't see any more questions, and it's 5:07 already. I think I'll conclude our session. Thank you all for presenting today, and thank you for joining us today. This is also our last session of this conference, so hope you all enjoyed the conference. We will share the recordings as soon as we can process them. Please stay tuned for recordings. I guess thank you all for participating, and hope you all have a great Thanksgiving and happy holidays.